The following message is by Pastor John Piper. More information from Desiring God is available at www.desiringgod.org.
One of the truths of the Bible that I and we at our church back in Minneapolis embrace with trembling joy is the truth of God's supremacy in all things. The mission of our church, and I would say the mission of my life, is that we exist to spread a passion for the supremacy of God in all things, for the joy of all peoples through Jesus Christ. And when we say that we exist to spread a passion for the supremacy of God in all things, we don't mean we exist to spread a passion for the supremacy of God in all things except Katrina, or all things except Pakistan, or the supremacy of God in all things except your mother's cancer, or the supremacy of God in all things except your little brother's leukemia. There are no excepts. We exist to spread a passion for the supremacy of God in all things, period. No exceptions. All things. Our lives exist to make God look what He really is, gloriously supreme in all things for the joy of all peoples through Jesus Christ. And we didn't formulate that mission statement with our head in the sand, as though we got it phrased and then went out and bumped into suffering in the world and said, oops, we forgot something. That's not the way it came into being. We have walked, in the 25 years that I've been there, many people into the grave. Some of them at age 5 hours, and some of them at age 5 months, and some 5 years, and some 5 decades, and some 8 decades. And many of them have died hard, not easy. We exist to spread a passion for the supremacy of God in all things, for the joy of all peoples, through Jesus Christ. And none of us who has lived a few decades would ever embrace this mission without trembling. And none of us who's ever lived in this for a few months has lived in it without tears. We've said it dozens of times at our church. I hope you say it. I hope you learn it, say it, live it. That the joy we seek, and I'm a Christian hedonist, I am always seeking joy, always seeking my joy. The joy we seek is a joy that is always laced with sorrow. No exceptions. There is no unadulterated joy in this world for people who have their heads out of the sand and love people. Sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. 2 Corinthians 6:10 is a motto at our church. Sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. How can that be? I wonder if you're old enough to have learned that mystery. I am sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. I am rejoicing, yet always sorrowful. Always sorrowful. How can that be? It can be because God is supreme over all things, and there is suffering in the world. God is now and always will be absolutely sovereign and supreme, and there is now, and it will come to an end, suffering. And the Bible says, weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And you always know somebody who's weeping, and you always know somebody who's rejoicing, and therefore you will always be rejoicing, and you will always be sorrowful if you love people and you live in a real world. That's Romans 12:15. Sorrowful with those who are sorrowing, rejoicing with those who are rejoicing. And you always know somebody who's rejoicing. And you always know somebody who's sorrowing. So that little phrase from 2 Corinthians 6:10, sorrowful yet always rejoicing, is an absolute key to at least understanding the way I work out my Christian hedonism. I'm on a quest for maximum joy, and I mean maximum in quality and maximum in extent, which means I won't settle for any two-bit, half-baked, short-term, 80-year-long joy that lets you down in hell when you're done with it. I'm not the least interested in that. I want a kind of joy that is as deep and high as it can be and as long as it can be, and it better be 80,000 years or I'm not interested. And I hope you aren't either. I hope you're not so foolish as to trade your soul for 80 years of pleasure. So, it came about that a few weeks ago, the anniversary of 9/11 happened on a Sunday. And we gave a lot of thought to that at our church and what we ought to do with it. And so these reflections are partly because of that. The first plane that flew, Flight 11, into the tower had 92 people on board. And of course they all died instantly in a ball of fire. Flight 175 hit the second tower a few minutes later. It had 65 people on board, and they all died instantly in another ball of fire. In the towers themselves, in spite of so many valiant efforts, 2,595 people perished when they fell, including hundreds of those who were going up the stairs instead of down the stairs because they cared about people. Flight 77 carried 64 people when it hit the Pentagon about an hour later on the first attack. And inside the Pentagon, 125 people died, so 64 of those and 125 of them. And then Flight 93, with 45 people on board, was turning around, making a U-turn over Pennsylvania when the cell phones started popping, and Todd Beamer and others evidently wrestled the controls of the plane from the hijackers and brought it down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and all 45 people died, for a total of about 2,986 people. And we thought on that Lord's Day that we would mark that as the thing everybody was feeling, and you know what happened instead, that nobody hardly was thinking about 9/11 that weekend. Everybody was thinking about the week before and New Orleans. New Orleans was different. Katrina was different in anything this country has experienced ever. There was a hurricane in Galveston, September 8, 1900, that killed up to 12,000 people. So it wasn't different in that it killed 1,000 people. The quantities were far greater with other hurricanes, especially that one. But it was the first time in the history of this world, this country, that a city was totally emptied. A major city totally emptied and so devastated, with hundreds of thousands of people being displaced, some of them to our town, even in Minneapolis. So we were thinking about that, and now if we were marking anything, we would be thinking about Pakistan, and what is the number? Has it gotten beyond 80, 90,000 people taken out in one earthquake? And I want to make sure you don't think naively about this, as though the cost of life there was unusual in any of those? 9/11, Katrina, Pakistan. You know, don't you, that 50 million people die every day in this world. 50 million people die every day in the world. 6,000 roughly every, what would that be? Hour?